Yeah, we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. This is a place where we question everything. So today we're going to be having a conversation around colorism, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Lakia Queen and Stanley. Stanley is a favorite of this channel, so everybody sort of knows him. I won't go into any introductions. So if you're
Mhm.
just joining the stream, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. So many people are all too familiar with the concept of racism, which is a big issue, which is an intra-group discrimination based on skin color, with notions of superiority and inferiority. But a lesser known problem is colorism, which, in my simple definition, is also discrimination based on skin color, but more within a group. So, in intergroup discrimination based on skin color. So, today we are going to be talking about what colorism is, what the possible root causes of colorism, how it manifests itself around the world. But specifically, we're going to be talking about colorism in the Black community and how it affects relations in the Black community, and how much of a problem it is, whether it's something to be worried about, and what steps we can take to, to address the issue of colorism, if at all. So I believe this is going to be a very interesting stream as we begin. So I'm just going to put the first question to Lakia and get Stanley's thoughts on it too. I know I've given a short definition of colorism. I may be wrong, it may be something else. So Lakia, what is colorism? How would you describe colorism? How would you define colorism?
Well, the way that I define colorism, and I guess the first time I came to even know of the word, in a sense, like in a political sphere, is through Alice Walker. I don't know if you guys know her. But she kind of talked about colorism as being like a preferential treatment, right, of the same race of people based solely on their skin color. So in the Black community, the way that manifests itself is like you have a preference to lighter skin. Some people have preference to lighter skin Black people than darker skin. So that would be my definition.
Okay. Stanley, what would be your definition of colorism?
Uh, well, you know me, I have to overcomplicate everything.
Please go ahead.
I think um, I don't think it's particular to the to ADOS, to the American Black community. I think it's actually um, a concept that's been kind of there throughout the diaspora, including Africa. I'm thinking of skin lighteners, that sort of thing. Essentially, it is a preference for people that are of African heritage that are closer to a European beauty ideal, to be kind of technical about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. And
Mhm.
this relates to the secondary point of this script today, which is, does light skin privilege exist? No, we can talk all about white privilege, whether it exists and whether or not it exists. But if it's akin to, if light skin privilege or colorism is akin to white privilege, then let us see how much of a problem it is and where it comes from. I mean, Stanley, you said something about it being not just being an American problem. I think I can attest to that. Even in Africa, and even when I was talking with Templar this evening, he talked to me about the experiences in Japan, how light skin is preferred. That even though the Japanese would discriminate against foreigners, including white people, he as a white man gets better treatment than even other Asians like the Koreans or the Chinese, um, who presumably would be a shade darker than himself. And there was a documentary I saw about biracial children in Japan called Hafu, as half Japanese, half foreigner. And if you were if you were half full and one of your parents was white, that was considered good. That was considered excellent. Or if the other parent was black, that was considered, sort of like a bad thing. But that's in the concept of Japan. But even in Africa, there is still that kind of thing exists where children of biracial couples, when they come around to Africa, there's usually some sort of preference for those biracial kids. They're seen as more fragile. There's more attention that's given to it. But I want us to look at the root causes. Is white a standard? And if whiteness is a standard, how, or if lightness is a standard, how did it develop in the first place? Where did this concept come from that light is better than dark?
Lakia?
I actually wanted to ask Charles a question before we went into that, if that's okay. Just
Go
about
ahead,
your
sure.
friend Templar that's in Japan.
Yeah.
So what I heard you say is that he gets more preference over, I guess Japanese people because of his lighter skin.
No.
No, is that
He
not what you
gets
said?
more preference over other non-Japanese people. Like, of course, the Japanese will put themselves at the top. Then the white man comes next. Then any other,
Got
the
it.
other Asians, like the Koreans, the Chinese, and others come after that.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like in the case of like colorism in the Japanese culture, if it has something to do with like preferring lighter skin because that somehow signifies like being more ethnically pure in a way. I mean, did you ask him about that?
No, I didn't ask him about that. It was just part of the conversation we're having.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Oh wow. Cheryl is asking me to send the link to this our
Well, let me
interview.
share
So
it.
can you give me
Let me share it.
can you send it to her in her email? She wants to join.
What's her email? Well, let me send it on private chat so you can forward it to her. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see it in the private chat?
You can go ahead and answer that question because I don't really have an answer for it right now. I'm going to take some time to send this to Cheryl.
All right. So, Stanley, let's go. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I repeat the question again.
Okay. So my question is, you said this idea of colorism, of preference for lighter skin within a particular group, is not something that is unique to African Americans. You can find it
I
in
got
other
it.
cultures. And
Right.
yes, I corroborated that. Yeah, you can find that even in Africa too. Templar said something of that nature in Japan and some parts of Asia. So I'm asking, where did the concept of light being the standard, of it being better than dark, where did it come from?
Well,
Is there any historical analysis that we can make to say this is where this thing began to crop up?
well, I actually think if you step back a little bit, it's a beauty standard. And, someone, Anon actually, often refers to something like beauty privilege or something like that. And if I mentioned the diaspora, but even if you step back into European history, there's a color line there. Southern Europeans versus Northern Europeans. I mean, I think to me, it pretty much goes back to a beauty standard and what is valued at the time. And an interesting thing is, in the U.S., people who want to go out and tan to get browner skin. To me, it's kind of ephemeral. But if the question, I think it's a beauty standard. And I think some of it is kind of what's popular at the time. But
Mm,
zeroing in on the African American community, the ADOS community, um, there was a lot of favoritism. And I'm going to get graphic here, but the master who would have kids with a slave woman. I mean, it's almost like a biology thing where you're going to favor the kids that look more like you, who are, your biological
mm,
relatives. So it's not as simple as why there, like any human thing.
mm.
There are about 1,000 different ways to look at it. Some of them are more right than others, but in a way, all 1,000 of the inputs are right.
Mm.
I probably sound complicated, but it's not a simple question. There are no simple answers. I think in the end, it comes down to a beauty standard and what that beauty standard might be. And I know I went on too long.
Okay, so let me see if I can paraphrase what you just said and see if I'm right. So what you're saying is that um, during slavery, obviously the white masters would have intercourse,
Well,
would
we're
rape
talking
their black.
specifically American slavery.
Yeah, during American slavery, the white masters would rape the black slave women and would produce children by them. And the
Right.
children from such union had better access. There was favoritism to them. They were given more privilege than the children of other slaves that were of black parents. Now you're saying that it may just be because the master is seeing them as his kin, as his relative, compared to the others. That's why he treats them that way, not just because they're lighter skin. It's just that they're closer to him relations wise. Is that what you were trying to say? That it's more complex than just
That could
the
be
skin?
that could be one reason.
Mm,
And I'll actually give you a term: house slave, Negro slave. I'm
mm,
sorry, house slave, field slave. And there are
mm,
a bunch of different. So there's that to consider as terminology. And
mm,
then the historical example I give, because Jefferson is actually my favorite founding father. Um,
mm,
he and Sally Hemings had 5 or 6 kids. I can't remember.
mm,
Oddly enough, he freed his progeny with Sally Hemings.
mm,
When he died, he did not free any of his other slaves. So, I
mm,
mean, that's like a really concrete example of privilege. Now, I'm not saying it was necessarily, you know, uh, a colorism thing, but I think you could make that argument. In
mm.
my point about, the progeny of the slave master being more privileged, I mean, that's a stark example.
Mm. But it does seem that all over the world, even throughout history, dark-skinned people seem to be getting the short end of the stick.
Well, there are
In co-
ways out of it. I think by and large, you're right. However, just like any other, meritocracy kind of thing, you
mm,
know, sometimes skills, like, a really skilled slave who could tame horses or, had blacksmithing skills. There are a lot of caveats. So you can't just go, it was this way or the other. There were, tons of caveats.
mm. But even if that is the case, if you had to take into consideration the skills of people who were given privilege, don't you think that them being light in the first place would have been a criteria for them to have access to
Oh,
learn such
it would
skills?
be it would be a criteria depending on the situation. It could be the only criteria. It could be the major criteria. My only thing is that there are always caveats. But if you want to make a generality or a general argument, yeah, um, closer to the European beauty standard would be, let's call it a rule of thumb
Mm.
or a
So,
trend or whatever.
so I want us to explore this beauty standards angle. I think it's something I could also speak to. But my question before we do that is this a testament to the influence of European civilization in the world? I mean, if dark-skinned people were the ones who had colonized most of the world and spread their culture, their language, and their technology, would it have been the case that dark skin would have been the standard to attain, to strive towards? So is this a fallout of the influence of European civilization or colonization around the globe?
I think that is too hypothetical to really even take a guess at.
Mm.
I
Okay.
mean, do we have a place where blacks have colonized, a European civilization or anything close to that?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. So we can theorize, we can guess. I would guess yes, but I don't have even, you know, I don't, I can't even make an educated guess.
Mm,
Nothing like that has ever existed.
true, true. So like, yeah, is Cheryl, is she joining us anytime soon? I'm just trying to stall a bit so that she can meet most of the conversation. Hello, Lakia, are you there? Oh, she's off. Okay, so
Oh, now
down
you have to stall with me more.
back to the beauty standards angle. Now, in my country, especially women, this is common with women. I think this is more a female problem in my country than any other thing. If you
Hmm.
go through the social media history of certain young women and see their pictures of 10 years ago, 5 years ago, compared to now, you would see a stark difference. At times, you would even think they are two different individuals. The
Wow.
one from 10 years ago is a dark person, and the one today is so light that you would not believe that
Was
they
it
are the same.
skin cream or lighting?
It's the skin cream. It's a big business. This skin lighting cream in Africa and Nigeria is a big business. Almost all the young women are involved in the skin lightening behavior. So they buy creams to lighten themselves, or they buy things they add to the creams. And
Right.
so to me, it's more a here for me, it's more a beauty standard than anything else. At least that's what I've observed. It's just seen as if a lighter skin is it's more beautiful, it's more attractive, it's more.
Well, I guess my question would, well, Lakia's back.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right. Can you hear us, Lakia? Can you hear us? Okay, just let me know when
Yes,
you
I
can talk.
can.
So
I can
Stanley,
hear
go ahead.
you. I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
okay. Yes, yes, we can hear you.
I
So I was just
sorry.
asking.
I apologize for my choppy Wi-Fi. Charles, if you can send Cheryl the link because I can't my Wi-Fi. But can you go ahead and fill me in where you guys are right now?
Yeah. Okay, just help me type her email address so I can send it to her. So we're talking about um, how much of this colorism is just a beauty standard. If it's not um, if it's not the idea that if it's more a problem with women wanting to look lighter and all that. And I give the example that in my country, if you go through the social media history of young women and see their pictures of like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if you compare it to now, you're going to see a stark
Right.
difference. The girl from 10 years ago is a dark person, and the girl for now is someone entirely different. The skin tone is entirely different. And what they do is they have these skin lightening creams, which is a big business here. The skin lightening creams that they use to tone themselves to whatever complexion that they want to have. So is this really the thing with colorism, or is there more to it? Is there political access to it? Is there economic access to having a lighter skin tone, or is it just simply a beauty standard, a preference for lighter skin in terms of the dating market?
Yeah, I just think that it's more of a beauty standard. I mean, because I could think about, I have like Sudanese friends and that have, grew up in Sudan, and they kind of tell me about the culture back home, and they have like skin lightening centers there where women can go in the center, and order a treatment and come out like 3 shades lighter in a day. And so basically what they do is they put a lot of these skin creams along with all kinds of herbs and ash, and they rub it on the women, and it rubs their skin off, you know. The same is true in Jamaica. There's all kinds of skin care lightening products there. Um, you know, I it's just everywhere, and I do feel like it is a beauty standard, but somehow that beauty has been equated with some sort of value, and just how does that value kind of materialize into reality, right? The only way I really see that it shows up is like maybe like in the entertainment industry, right? There's, especially here in the US, there seems to be, and I think even I've seen a lot of Nollywood films, and it's also in places like India and places in the Arab world, where, and in the South America, where the lighter skinned person, get it makes the role, like they are on television more, and movies, on the news, and all of that. And so I can see how women would appeal to that, because they feel like, oh, these women are really beautiful. Obviously, they're on television. They're all over social media, so I want to look like that. So it feels very superficial and surface level to me. Because I don't know how it in other places it materializes. I don't know if, well, actually I could say, like, especially speaking from African Americans, as an African American woman, and looking at the percentage of the women in our Black community that are unmarried. I'm sure this statistic includes women who don't want to be married, maybe gay women, and I don't have all that breakdown, but I know 78% of the women in the US, Black women in the US, are unmarried. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like, of course, people want to marry beautiful wives, right? People want beautiful women, and
Yeah.
if a lot, right? So if 78% of these people are unmarried, I don't know. I would love to see the statistics of whether these are lighter skinned or darker skinned women. When I look amongst my friends, it's a large. I have an area of friends with different shades, and most of them are not married, and they're, like I said, from lighter to darker skin. So I don't know if this lighter skin actually does, have a real value in the real world. Um, yeah, Stanley, what do you think about that?
About what, the beauty standard?
The beauty standard, like, and if you think about beauty and just in relationship to people getting married, most men want to marry beautiful women. 78% of the
Well, I
women.
mean, that's lasted way before Europeans were even Europeans.
Right.
Um, um, I put a message into the back chat,
Okay.
um, and not to you specifically, but um, I'm kind of gonna stand by my thing about a European beauty standard. I've seen at least one person that doesn't agree, and I'm, you know, that's the
I,
terrible thing about reading books.
mhm. I I've read so much literature. Like I have a background in cultural studies, so I've read literature from all over the world, and I can remember reading some of the like traditional Chinese literature where they spoke about like the beauty of a woman and her skin being as white as snow, and
Yeah.
but I don't think that came from Europe, you know.
Well, I would agree with that. And unfortunately, I am so narrow that I tend to kind of focus on American history.
Right.
So I agree with you there. I mean, there's the whole, geisha
Geisha,
culture.
yeah, geisha culture.
Yeah. So, and foot binding, which is a different, show.
Mhm.
But no,
Yeah.
I agree with you there. It's not just European. I
No.
agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think European, from where I'm standing in the U.S.,
Hmm.
it's European. The influence.
Okay.
Okay, so Stanley and Lakia, in
Hmm.
your estimation, do you think that men have a preference for lighter skinned women? Is there
No.
any indication to show that?
No, like I said, with there being 78% of Black women in the U.S., you know, unmarried, I'm sure a large number of those women are lighter skinned women. Um,
Well, hold on now. Divestors are a totally different show.
what's that? I mean, I don't mean to sound harshly. I'm just
Oh, no,
saying
no,
that.
no.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I thought of divestors. Um,
Mhm. Okay.
I But Charles, that's a very pointed question to ask a man. Um, I can't do generalities whether men prefer lighter skinned women. I would say no. They prefer beautiful women.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. They prefer beautiful women, not just. A lot of the times when these girls do these things, as if there's a disconnect between what they think men want and what men actually want. Because by the end of the day, some of these women, the bleaching is so badly done that it even disfigures them, makes them more, makes them less attractive. Their knuckles are dark and some other parts of the body are light. Their veins become bluish, and where's the beauty there? Where's the attraction there? Where
Well, I don't.
is
Charles, sure, you're right. Of course, that is not attractive, uneven skin and all of that. But I mean, you two are men. You know what you like in a woman, so you can help us with this. You can help us answer this question. Do you only look for a woman for what she has to offer externally, or are there also internal qualities that you're looking for in a woman? And the question is, are these lighter skinned women possessing those qualities? And well, first, just let's answer that question. What are the internal qualities that you're looking for in a woman when you're choosing to marry them?
Stanley? You go first.
What? Um, Now you have to understand, I'm a lot older than you are, Charles. Um, over the over the years, as I have been beat up and earned my wisdom.
Yeah, you could be my dad.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Um, I I have learned, and I have a 16-year-old son. Um, yes, she has to be attractive,
Mhm.
because that's kind of biological. But I'm telling you right now, she has to be smart, and she has to take her smart and be funny. Because life is hard. If you can't laugh together, it's gonna be, boring if nothing else. So I think physical attraction is honestly, kind of a 16-year-old's attraction. But as you get older, um, and this is going to sound horrible, you tend to be a little bit more balanced in your perspective. Um, so is that far enough? I'm
Yeah,
trying. I'm trying not to
yeah,
get
yeah,
canceled.
yeah, granddad. So let me give my view. So I think that beauty is a big prerequisite for men in terms of who they choose as a mate. At least at the point of attraction, how beautiful she is physically is a big point. But that's like getting you into the interview, but it doesn't guarantee you the job. I mean, there are other things that now comes after that. So our character comes in, her demeanor, her personality, her intelligence,
Yeah.
and all that. And even for me, her voice. I think a
Yep.
female's voice is a big component for me. I just like certain voice texture for women and all that. So yes, beauty, people fall in love in mysterious ways. There are times you think that okay, oh, man, this person is just beautiful. You want to be with them, but by the end of the day, you see that it doesn't really match up with what you're looking for. With you don't see yourself spending your life with this person because of some other factors. So even though she's that beautiful, it doesn't guarantee.
You know
It
what?
doesn't
That is
guarantee.
such an important point. And I don't want to go off on the granddad bent, but one of these things, and this is slightly off topic, but I tell my son, don't get way involved, with a woman that, you first thing you need to ask is if, something became a family way, could you spend the rest of your life or even some time with this girl? You know where I'm going with that? Just don't, you have to think somewhat into at least the medium future. I hope that makes sense. Charles?
Yeah, can you go through that? Can you say that again? I was a bit distracted with
Well,
some
no,
of the chat.
I'm just saying, don't do one night stands. Maybe that's the point.
Well,
You have to,
one night
if
stands are not supposed to be a long-term committed relationship thing. So I don't think they really
and
apply.
that, well, they can, it happens, but not often. But you know, getting that involved emotionally, physically, whatever, you at some point, and young men aren't gonna, realize this, and even if you tell them, they'll just go, "You're old." But you actually do have to think. And even when I was young, do I want to wake up in the morning and see her? Do I want to have coffee? Do I want to,
Mhm.
there's some things like, you know, maybe not to a point to where do I want to introduce her to my parents, but
Mm,
do I want to go to lunch with her the next day?
mm.
And when the hormones are raging, et cetera, it's tough to be that objective. But I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I used to think like that.
Mm. Now, on the flip side, no, there's this a friend of mine who there's a girl in his office that he likes, and she likes him. They obviously like each other. The only thing that's stopping him from starting a relationship with her is that she's light skinned. He doesn't like light skinned girls. So if she was darker skinned, he would have gone for her. So this just shows that people's preferences are you can't really tell. You can't I don't think there is one cap fit all. Although we can make generalizations in a general sense, do men actually prefer lighter skinned women? In my experience, I don't think so. They prefer beautiful women, but that beauty is only an admission criteria. What keeps you other characteristics or other factors?
Well, look, here you go. I have my answer.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, thank you guys for answering that. So what I guess I'm hearing is that having lighter skin isn't necessarily a privilege. Um,
Say that again. Are you saying in terms of the dating market?
Well, in your friend's case, having darker skin was a privilege, or would be a privilege.
Yep, yep, yep.
But I do have to say, Charles, and this goes for all the kids. Your preference is your preference.
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
So, however, be willing to make exceptions.
Yeah.
There are some things like I can remember, way back in the ancient days. Um, you know, you might, I might not be thinking that much when I meet you, but you make some joke or just something that's so interesting. You know what? Um, and again, way back in the distant memory, but smart to me personally, and this is somewhat older, but um, decent looking, but smart can get you somewhere. Personality can get you somewhere. Having something about you can get you somewhere.
Yep,
To me,
yep,
with me.
yep. I think that's true because a lot of the time, I think men are more before they make a commitment for marriage, they get more critical. So maybe they can date and have sex with all the beautiful women there is that's available to them. But when it comes to okay, settling down, they're not just going to pick the most beautiful girl that they've been with. They're going to look at other things as well. So if
Well,
she doesn't have that,
essentially, what you're saying is men, as they get older, get more like women. Very well. I don't. It's a joke. It's flippant, but in the end, if you think about it, more choosy.
yeah, yeah,
Is this person worth your time and commitment?
yeah. So I guess
That's what it's all about.
Cheryl has joined us. Hey Cheryl, I guess you're Queen Warrior. Welcome to the conversation. How you
Can you
doing?
hear me? I'm doing well. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Can hear you.
I think Stanley
All right.
said
So
the joke is misogynist. The joke? Watch your language. Be conscious and mindful.
What was said that you didn't like, Cheryl?
He said men are becoming more like women, indicating that women don't like sex. Or what? It's like that's misogynist.
No, 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 no. I meant I meant choosier, more discerning about relationships. I didn't, I
Oh, okay.
hope I didn't go there. Did I,
I
Charles?
don't know because you had
no,
spoken.
no, you did.
I think she came in at the tail end of your
Yeah,
Yeah,
conversation.
I came in at
Yeah,
the
thanks
tail
for
end,
clarifying.
and so maybe
yeah. So I don't think that what Stanley was saying is that somewhat men's criteria for choosing a mate as they get older it becomes more akin to women's criteria, which is not just about physical attributes. So other things, more substantial things come into play. That was what he was driving at.
even though I missed the bulk of the conversation, do you not believe that men don't have other criteria other than those surface criteria? Because I think most people, humans, have a surface criteria. It's not always ingrained. I think it's something that you learn. And I think it's when you continue that narrative, you're saying, this is how men are, this is how women. That's not necessarily. I don't think I think it's, I don't know. I'm asking
Uh,
you. My belief is I
I
think you ask you.
I think Steve, if you'd like to join, come on up. So I think that, of course, that these things vary on an individual basis for any category for us to make some reasonable generalizations, some reasonable guesses. It's not going to be true for everybody, but you know, so at times that's what we go off on based on. But anyway, let's get back to the conversation. So we're talking about colorism. We're talking about root causes, how it manifests itself, specific examples, and how it plays out in society, especially in the Black community. And if it's a problem to be worried about, and what steps we can take to address it. So, Cheryl, can you tell us what you think colorism is, and by extension, where you think such ideas come from?
I think colorism is a artificial social construct that is used um, to divide people. It's a divisive way of thinking, and it's based upon genetic differences in particular, people of African descent or people who have melanocytes. Those are cells that carry a lot of melanin. Some have more. We have 5 layers of epidermis in our skin, and some have a lot and some have little, but there's a caste. So yeah, it's a way to divide people and to set up a hierarchy based upon light and dark.
So,
And
where do you think that
that's
comes from?
really, well, it does definitely, in my mind, it stems from the other concept called white supremacy, and it's used and it's used by the capitalist system to have some power. So it's based on power and greed.
So, if it's based on white supremacy, how would you explain such preference for lighter skin in places like Japan or even in Africa, where women bleach themselves? Is it also a carryover of white supremacy into all those cultures as well?
Assimilation is based upon assimilating and believing that if you're lighter, you're going to. I mean, it cuts across many things. It's going to give you some sort of. It's a some way of. It's a currency. It's going to give you some type of power. Something. Having lighter skin, you're closer to white, or people who have no very little melanin melanin in their skin, and for some strange reason, those people are not some strange reason. We know why, but they're placed above others. And so it's about power, and it's about having something that you think you don't have, and it's internalizing um, racist ideologies, internalizing. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cheryl, do you think that this is kind of an illusion, or if this is reality? Like, does one's skin have, some material value or currency, like you were saying, in the real world?
Oh, no, it's definitely an illusion, but people grab onto it. It's no, it doesn't. It's genetic. You can't,
Like, you can't show up in the grocery store with your grocery cart and your light skin and take as many things off the shelf as you want and walk out because you're
no,
lighter skin, right?
no more than you can use that white privilege card, which I actually ordered from a friend of mine ordered from Amazon, and say, okay, I am now spot free. I don't have to pay for anything. It's a joke. In
Mm-hmm.
my mind, it's a joke. But no, it's an illusion. But people hold on to it as if it's real, and it's
Right.
been um, ingrained in our society because it does. Because who's in power? People who have very little, or who has been in power? People who have very little melanin in their skin, and therefore
So
they're
it's
saying that
it's a
they are.
power thing.
It's definitely it has. Well, it's more like it has to do with money. That really, money and
One
power.
quick question.
Mhm.
So colorism is about power.
No, I really can't say that colorism is about power. I think it's a mental dis-ease, if you will. If you're a person of African descent, you're a person who comes from people who have lots of melanin in their skin.
I think what Cheryl is saying that people believe in this illusion that having lighter skin equates to having more value, and I don't know if it's material value or um, like we were talking about beauty politics earlier, or really what is it, and is it real, or is it really an illusion? I guess where I would like to take this conversation is like, is it harmful to the Black community?
Mm.
I
And
agree
which
that it's
ways
harmful. Hmm.
and which ways is it harmful? Are these things harmful? Like, to have women bleaching their skin, and I think there's a lot of statistics out there that show like people actually damage their skin. They can get skin cancer, they can have kidney failure, and all of that. So that's one of the ways that it you know, shows up as harmful in our community. But what are some other ways? Does it affect you economically or academically? Um, I don't know. You guys can help me come up with some ways that to think about ways that could be harmful in our community.
It's harmful in how it's harmful in how you esteem yourself. It can be. Let's say it has the potential. If you believe that having lighter skin is making you is some sort of currency, some sort of power, it can't. It's and you have friends who, yeah, it's
Psychologically,
harmful. It's like, yeah,
psychologically
psychologically, it has a
harmful. Yeah.
harmful effect psychologically to people,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of where you lie in the spectrum of being pale to dark. It's very harmful psychologically because you're not looking at life in you're not looking through a reality lens. It's an illusory lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
So, as a follow-up, is there, because I think the problem you just highlighted right now is more of an internal problem with the person who views themselves as what less because they have a darker shade of skin. That's a psychological problem that's within themselves. But within society itself, in a general sense, are there privileges associated with being lighter skinned, being a lighter skinned dark black person in within black communities? Say in an economic front, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of so many other things that are external to the individual, not just psychological. Are there advantages, are there privileges to being a lighter skinned um, black person?
I think that depends on who you are. If you believe there's privilege, are there real privileges? It depends on the situation and who's got the power in the situation, and what they think. It's a, I mean, I don't think you can say across the board. No, I want to roll back on that. I would say that when in America, where you've seen African American people who could pass because of what has happened previously generationally to their families, and they're very, very fair, yet they are of African descent. There's a reason why people chose to mask their African identity because they knew they could get ahead. So yes, um, it did, it can confer something, but it also messed with their minds. I mean, I don't know how you can pretend to be someone you're not, and listen to ugliness at the same time because you want to gain some type of influence, i.e., monetary. If anyone else wants to tighten that up for
Yeah.
me, please go ahead.
Lakia, what do you think? Have you seen examples of a lighter skinned black person getting ahead in life, getting certain privileges, principally because of the light skin?
Not solely based on their lighter skin. I think Stanley was talking about just like other things that people value in anybody, like a person, right? Like the way they talk, how smart they are, how they engage with people. I've never seen someone, have privilege solely based on their lighter skin. I know a lot of people think that, especially in um I want to say the Bay Area, but I'm based in Santa Cruz, and I've heard these conversations around, like, a lot of activists and local um, political groups and stuff like that. But I just feel like that is specific to that group of lighter skinned mixed race black people in Santa Cruz, because where I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, that isn't so. I mean, it. I don't know what it's like now because I haven't lived there in over 20 years. But when I was growing up, I was born in 81. When I was growing up, I don't remember having conversations about skin color, you know? Um, and I don't remember people being privileged necessarily, especially not like, not in my family, not at schools, not in my workplace. I don't remember people being privileged. Now, if it was an extremely beautiful, lighter skinned woman, maybe she has some privilege, but I don't think it's just her lighter skin. I think she has, you know, features that people like, right? That are pleasant for people to look at. But I think the same is true for like a darker skinned black woman. So
I
no,
want to
I don't
hop in right quick, and this is a Savannah, Georgia thing. You're in. I've experienced this, but your mother might make a comment like, "But will you look here? You know where I'm going with this, right?" She might.
I think
She
so,
might.
but
She might make a comment, but in the end, beautiful is beautiful, and that's actually Savannah to me.
right. I agree.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure,
Hmm.
Steve. Go ahead.
Is the I'm a little bit confused as to where power is coming in here. Can someone explain that to me a little bit more clearly?
I think
I don't know if it's
Sherry
so
brought
much
that
as
up.
power over privilege, but I think Cheryl brought that up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're using the power over privilege, right? Um, so the question I have really is that, so is the power that some people have proportionately inverse to the color of their skin, meaning the lighter they are, the more power they have, and the darker they are, the more power or the less power they have? Because if that's the argument, I'm having a hard time getting behind that one.
Because that argument is too broad. It depends on what era.
Right.
Talking about the 1800s, let's stick in the 20th century, which is last century. I
Yeah.
would say that there was last century there was color actually conferred power if you were a black person, a black American.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
You'll find no disagreement with me on that.
but last century, Lakia, I don't think you were born last century. If you were a baby, but I seriously doubt it. I know my mother, who's a dark skinned woman, experienced a lot of prejudice, and she had a lot of difficulty, and she was super smart. She actually took exams to get into certain schools. And you know what they did? They called up my grandmother and they said, well, oh my goodness, she was one of the highest scoring, blah, 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 applicants, but we don't accept colored girls at this school. But they allowed her to take it. So what I'm trying
Right.
to, so yes, color of your skin had it definitely conferred when she was She was very active in this is my mother, very active in the Catholic Church. My grandmother was Roman Catholic. And who got the recognition? It wasn't old Black Joan. No, it wasn't. It was the lightest skinned women, and she was more beautiful than all the girls. Um, I say that because I'm looking and I'm thinking, God, and she didn't think she was beautiful. Wow. I was always so proud to walk down the street with such a beautiful, pretty mama. Although I grew up as my believing she was my older sister. But the point I'm making is that yes, color did confer a lot more than it probably does now. It's in
Okay.
small pockets of people who are middle class and upper middle class looking for something different.
Cheryl,
Gotcha.
can I ask you a quick question? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Boston,
Okay.
Massachusetts.
Bostonian. Yeah.
Yes,
Boston was an incredibly racist place for a long time.
it certainly was.
So I think that the line of questioning here is I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding what everybody's saying and making sure that I'm giving as much charity as I possibly can. So I apologize if these questions are a little bit like vague or maybe even contemptuous. I apologize. It's not intended to be that way. The second question I would have though is that if blackness infers less power than lightness, why do biracial people almost always choose to be black? That doesn't make any sense to me. And on top of that, what does the power dynamic exchange have anything to do with love specifically? Because I know we covered that, but that's not all that we're covering. Because it seems to me like the kind of person that I want to date, when I looked for someone in my wife, I was looking for someone who loves me, respects me, is going to be kind and will acknowledge me as a human being, a male with emotions, with feelings, with a complex personality. And so I don't see a power dynamic in my relationship with my wife, even though if we're using conflict theory, I have power over her all the time. But really, I mean, she's the neck that turns the head in my house. You know what I mean? So those are the two questions I would ask. The first two questions, I apologize. So I'm curious as to what you guys think.
I want Melinda to come and talk.
Melinda, do you want to come in? The link is in the comment section, so you can join us. So I think the question Steve asked is a valid question in terms of if there's a privilege to light skin, why do biracial kids want to be black? But I don't think those two things are contradictory. I mean, what does it mean to be black? If the light-skinned person is still seen as a black person culturally, it doesn't preclude them from having more privilege within that community because of their light skin. So even if blackness is the quote unquote cool thing now that everybody wants to be black, yet within that category of blackness, within it itself, the lighter skinned people can still possess certain I'm just thinking off the top of my head that it's not inherently contradictory that because black is in vogue, that light-skinned black people will not have advantage over darker-skinned black people. That's what I would think.
Yeah, my line of questioning here really is to try and understand it, because a lot of the times, someone who looks like me, who's racialized as white, doesn't get to ask these kind of questions. You know what I mean? And get an honest answer. Quite frankly, we're usually shouted down or told to shut up. And I think if you're trying to bridge a racial gap for reconciliation, it seems to me like you want to get to know each other. Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Righteous Mind: How Good People Are Divided by Religion and Politics. And he basically, to make a long story short, found that less division and less violence between groups occurs when those two groups have more in common than they don't.
Can I hop in right quick?
Go ahead, Stanley.
Jonathan Haidt is about the least useful author you could have in this conversation.
Well, I'm not using him as a reference. I'm using his
Well,
idea
no,
and his
you brought
research.
him up, and I'm going to stand by what I said. I'll stand by what I said. Jonathan Haidt is honestly not useful here.
All right. So let's get back to the conversation. So Cheryl, I wanted to ask you, how much of a problem do you think this is within the Black community? This colorism thing. Would you say it's a big problem? Would you say it's a minor inconvenience? Or would you say it's nothing at all? It's just, what would you say?
It's really hard for me to actually quantify that. I would say that it's minor, but I don't know everyone who's black. I I think it's silly. I mean, I honestly, yeah, I just, it's the most ridiculous thing I've heard. Yet, and still, it's real. People actually do hold on to that. They use that for something. It's a yardstick in people's minds, if nothing else, and it can play out in real life in terms of hiring, in terms of moving ahead. It can play out. Is it how real is it? Is the question, and I think someone needs to do a study, and maybe you all know whether there's a study that's done, and there's some, and they measured some metrics to figure it out. But I can't answer that question off the top of my head.
Okay, so Lakia, same question to you. How much of a problem is colorism within the Black community? Is it a minor inconvenience? Is it something that is substantially problematic that needs to be dealt with? What's your take on that? Lakia, can you hear us? Okay. TBC, the Black Commander, I don't know if you can come in. Maybe I want to get your perspective on this in terms of colorism in Nigeria, in Africa. If you can call in, I've given my own perspective, but it would be good to have another Nigerian, sort of broaden the perspective so I don't speak from a very, very narrow lens. Steve, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm just still I'm curious about the question that I asked because I'm still a little bit shaky on that. I don't understand, and
Well,
admittedly, that might be due to my own ignorance.
let me hop in right quick. I think Steve asked the best question so far. And I may be biased somewhat, but Steve asks, in light of what Cheryl has laid out, I think Steve's questions, his line of questioning is actually the best.
Okay, so Stanley, how would you respond to that question?
My question is, colorism is irrelevant in 2022.
Stanley, so you were kind of asking me the same question earlier and I couldn't get to the screen, but I think that it is a huge issue in the Black community because, colorism presents this, or just kind of gives birth to this like identity crisis, where a person is just confused about who they are their whole life. And so their identity becomes like insecure and unstable, right? So how do you, become a productive person if you can't, deal with, establish your identity? So I feel like it is a huge issue in our community, one that needs to be addressed.
I would just tend to disagree that colorism is that big a deal. In 2022, it used to be.
It maybe from where you're standing, but I have, recently dealt with a lot of issues around colorism, um, just up in the Bay Area amongst Black women. And it's really a huge issue in California, Stanley. This is a very different animal out here. There's a lot of self-hate. I have a really close friend, she's older, 65, who, one of her kids died to suicide because she didn't like her dark skin. I have another friend, she's 50, and she has a daughter that hates her skin. Now, this is out here in California. This is completely unheard of to me in Georgia, where I grew up.
Right.
But in this state, for the past like 20 something years that I've lived here, I've known this to be a huge issue out here with Black people, particularly Black people.
Well, I just want to say one thing. My answer would be rather dismissive on the face of it. So I just don't see it. And I just don't see it as that important. So, I'm old.
If I can just break in, I would say I don't know if it's a huge problem in the state of California, but clearly in the Bay Area where you're working, I think we have to be mindful of how it definitely is a problem with identity. And I think the next question I would ask is, so how do people start identifying and differentiate from being a person to I am a Black person, I am
Well,
whatever.
my question would be, and this isn't just this conversation. I think California is kind of like a metaphorical unicorn. So
All right, so we have Melinda. Melinda was able to join us. Hey, Melinda, it's good to have you. So, jump right in. What are your thoughts on what we're discussing so far?
Okay, this is my first time actually. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. This is my first time being on a chat ever. So I'm
Congratulations. Welcome.
trying to figure out how to do this, but I'm actually born and raised in California, and it's an issue. Like the previous person said, it's I don't know, it gets psychological at times. And I've grown out of it, but it can be detrimental to someone's mental health because it's just like, it's more than a preference. Like, okay, you can say someone has a preference for curly hair or different color eyes, but it's like sometimes if you're darker, you're treated subhuman. I know that might seem dramatic, but in different households, that's how it is. It's like you might have two children. One might be lighter, one might be darker. The darker one may be ignored completely. And some people might be like, oh, you're over dramatizing it. It's like, no, I've experienced it and I've known other people who've experienced it. So it's pretty deep.
Thanks for saying that, Melinda. I didn't grow up here, but I discovered very early on that it's deep out here. And I'm a darker skinned Black woman, and I didn't even that. I was just telling Stanley earlier, when I was growing up in Georgia, I didn't really even think about my skin really. But when I came here and I started, befriending different women, Black women from the Bay Area, even I lived in Southern California. I was so surprised at how preoccupied people were with the color of people's skin. And yes, people, especially women and even some men, they tend to be more aggressive towards you. Have a more aggressive demeanor towards darker skinned women. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's just been my experience. It's really sad. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is a huge issue, especially out here. And I think that that's not only for here, like I mentioned in Sudan, a lot of the darker skinned women can't get married, and they're told throughout their whole life, like, you just need to lighten your skin and you can get married, you know. I've heard those stories. So I think it's a huge issue in the Black diaspora.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but it's like even when I was growing up, it's like I've always been kind of like soft spoken or whatever. And it just in my experience, I have a stepsister who is lighter with freckles and everything. It's like I guess that would be the preference. And so we are kind of opposite. It's like I'm kind of soft spoken and kind of like, oh, okay, floating around. And she's, I'm just going to say rough. And so it's like you're expected to be harder if you're soft as a darker female. I don't know about the males, but if you're a female, it's like, oh my gosh, like you're supposed to be harder because you're expected to have a harder life. So it's more than just like a physical thing. I mean, I'm saying in America, I don't really know about anywhere else, but it's like in America, it's like, okay, you're supposed to take on the burdens of everything, especially if you're darker. You're not meant to be a soft, feminine, and I guess that's where this whole like, on the internet, it's like this feminine, what would I call it? Movement among darker skinned women. Cause it's like, okay, that's the, what am I trying to say? That's the view of darker women. It's like, you're supposed to be hard, take care of everything. And yeah, it's pretty deep. So anyway.
Yeah, I just wanted to say quickly, I don't know if anyone here speaks Arabic, but the Arabic translation for like, I guess black or dark skin is like slave. And yeah, and so just kind of thinking of this issue in the context of Sudan, I do feel like even because of the language, and how people think about, like how language translate, it almost feels like, yes, if you are darker, you are a slave, right? And therefore you should receive harsher treatment, do more work, and so there is some like commonality in what you said, what happens in the Bay Area and also what happens in Sudan, and I'm sure in other parts of the world. I'm just using that as an example because these are like more recent conversations that I've been a part of.
Okay, so let me try and bring Steve in now. So Steve, you came in when we were talking about preferences that men, what sort of preferences, what do men look out for in terms of choosing a mate? What would you say in your experience is the most important factors that men consider in choosing a mate? Is beauty the most important factor? And in terms of beauty, is skin color an important component of that beauty standards that men look out for in choosing a mate?
So there was a really great book written a little while ago that actually investigated these questions, and it was a pretty big study, about 300 some odd people. Actually, I think it was about 600 people. And what they found was amongst women had more than, I think it was a ridiculous amount of requirements for a partner. And when I mean ridiculous, I mean upwards of 300 different criteria, but men only had 4 on average. And those 4 were basically wanted funny, loyal, respectful of them, right? So we're looking at how am I treated, right? Am I treated with respect? Am I heard? Is she funny? And I can't remember what the 4th one was, but they were predominantly related to.
And by funny, you mean, does she laugh at my jokes?
Maybe it's possible. No, for the majority of the things that men looked for, they were looking at how they themselves were treated, right? They, like, the list of attraction or sexual prowess wasn't even on the list for them. It wasn't a deal. It wasn't a deal maker for them. They wanted someone that was with them because they were treating them right. And I can actually speak to this too, because even after my last divorce, I was looking for someone who would respect me, not emasculate me, who would listen to me when I needed to talk about my feelings, who was funny. And my wife is hilarious. So men generally only have 4 criteria. We just want to know that when we go home, we're not going to be emasculated. We're going to be respected for the hard worker that we are. That we, get to laugh and enjoy each other's company. It's really, men are really simple creatures in that sense. But the problem is that, according to this author, women are on average, they're negotiating themselves out of relationships. And I find that horrible. You know what I mean? I want women to be happy.
Can I jump in here for one moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm having some difficulty with the generalization of women and men, meaning because within the group of men, there are racial groups and there are economic groups, and the same with women, and there's also sexual preference. So so right now we're talking about a heterosexual group of people, but when you're talking about the generalizations are just too much for me to say. I think we're not having a serious conversation. It reminds me of having a serious conversation with many years ago, and this white man said to me, "So the problem with black men, or the difference between white middle class men and black men," I said, "Stop right there. We're not going to have this conversation." He said, "Why?" I said, "You tell me what you said wrong, and I want you all to understand why he was taking a small section of white middle class men and saying all black men." And I'm thinking, no, if you want to have that conversation, it has to be about black middle class men, not all black men. And I think you have to. I think people have, based upon socioeconomic education, socioeconomic status, education, other life
Okay.
experiences, and race will play into what they're looking for. I know you want to generalize because it's easy, but then it's not a serious conversation. But it's okay.
Well, no, it's not a generalization. This is just merely a study. But I can tell you this is that there's a broad enough studies that have occurred that we can say without a doubt that men aren't concerned about class and income when dating a female. Now, if you're talking about gay men are somewhat even less picky. Gay men look for men that they can spend time with. I happen to know this because I'm very well entrenched in the gay community here where I live. My brother's gay, and my daughter is gay, and there's a lot of you are right. There are a lot of different criterias, but what my argument would be when we have to take into account so many variables on the power wheel, it's no longer feasible to find someone that meets all of our criteria, because there's so many things that we have to be mindful of. Like, that's not a relationship to me. If I have to think about all the ways that I am, I'm intersecting with other people, there's just no way that I can do that, because there's infinite numbers of ways. That doesn't mean we can't be mindful of them. Absolutely. And you would be absolutely 100% right by stating that. But I just find it being untenable to be able to have relationships with people when the primary concern is class distinction, economic distinction, education distinction, and racial distinctions.
I don't think that usually comes across when people are having an interpersonal relationship. That's not the intersectionality of who they are, doesn't really come up. I'm just saying, we're making a vast generalization about men do this, women do this.
No, but
I'm just having a hard time wrapping my mind around it. But okay.
But sure, when we're saying these things, we're not saying all men. Obviously, we're not saying all men. I was asking if you listen so far, each of the man has given his opinions on these things, have said vastly different things. In some points they overlapped, and other points they diverged. So he's speaking from, okay, this is what I think, this is my observation, and obviously he's not referring to all men. But as a man, at least as a man, you should have some sort of authority to say this is likely what men would want or like. He talked about respect, and I think, for me, objectively speaking, I think that's one very big criteria for men. Men want to be respected. Men love to be respected by their women. So we can, when he says that, we can now look and say, do you mean all men? Well, maybe there are some men that don't like being respected. That's fine for them. But to the extent to which I have interacted with other men and looked at myself as well, that checks out.
Yeah. Well, can I clarify really quick, Charles? Because just to make sure that I didn't make a mistake, or at least own it if I did. I don't believe I was making a generalization when I said on average. Now, however, I will entirely take responsibility for my words if it created a miscommunication. Absolutely. I tend to never generalize, because generalizations are a very weak argument to me. They tend to not actually play out in reality. So when I'm speaking from a study or multiple different studies, this one happened to be a multivariate study across, I think it was 11 or 12 different schools. These are the things that they found. It's not necessarily my opinion, but these are things that they found in the general population of the of the United States, across different racial boundaries, across different education, different class distinctions, and they found that men generally, on average, find the same things attractive across the board. Now, there's always going to be outliers, absolutely, but when we're talking about the general public, I think it's wise to keep in mind that the average is often pretty correlative.
Okay, so I have a question for the women. We were talking about colorism in terms of we talked about colorism in terms of beauty standards, how some women lighten their skin because they feel it gives them a better shot in the dating market. So for women, is there a particular preference in terms of skin tone for women? Do women find lighter skinned men more attractive? Or there's this tall, dark, and handsome thing. What do women mean when they say something like that?
Cheryl, do you want to answer that question?
I'm sorry. What is that question? I didn't hear that.
Like, I can go ahead and answer it, and
Yeah,
whoever
go
wants
ahead.
to. I will say that I have a preference for, generally, for darker skinned men. Just for appearance wise, that's just what I'm attracted to first. But then after that, there are other qualities, right? I do like smart men. I like funny men. I like kind men, understanding, people who listen, respect, loyalty, all those things Steve talked about earlier. So I guess first off, if I had a choice, I'd love to, date a darker skinned man. But, I've also been attracted to lighter skinned men, from not just lighter skinned Black men, but lighter skinned men from different races. And I like darker skin from different races too. So that's just how I'll answer that question. On the superficial level, yes, darker skin, all cross different races, backgrounds, religions, histories. But of course, the internal stuff matters the most, right? Or when I'm thinking about choosing a partner.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lakia. I mean, my preference is always, I'm attracted to dark. That's the aesthetic, but it's always what's underneath that vessel that's more important. That's always more important. And sometimes it comes out. Of course, when you see someone because you have eyes, right? Or they come over to you, you have eyes. But then you talk, and all those qualities that you're looking for, if they don't show themselves, maybe there's not going to be another conversation. Lakia and I had this conversation. We talked about this topic last night. Yeah, maybe there won't be another conversation because they didn't hit all the points, or maybe you'll give them enough a chance because there was enough there. So, but I think from a really superficial level, I'm usually attracted to tall, muscular, dark-skinned black men. If it's a man that I'm attracted to. But everything else that Lakia said, I'm looking for someone who's a good conversationalist, someone who's gentle, someone who's kind, has some sort of spiritual practice, likes to physically, I can go on. But that's more important. Respectful of women in general, and in particular me. You know what I'm saying?
All right. So Melinda, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh boy. I have a lot of thoughts on it.
Sure.
Maybe because I was brought up in like the 90s where being a light-skinned male, that was like the thing. It's like you have to be with a light-skinned male. You don't even give darker skinned males the time of day. And especially if you're dark, you wouldn't even think about it because I think the colorism was so deep. It's like, well, you wouldn't want to have a baby. And that's just the truth. But I personally, it's not an issue for me. When I was younger, maybe in my teens, it was like, okay, I'm going to gravitate more to the lighter skinned guys because that's just what's in my family. Like, my family is dark, basically. And so all the women are married to lighter skin or mixed people. So that's what I guess my attraction was. But I personally, as I've grown, it's not an issue for me. I look for people who have the same interest as me. And yeah, I try to break myself of that because it's kind of toxic in my view. But I mean, what I've seen now, I think people have changed. It's more of like, okay, we want a darker skinned guy like Idris Alba. That's like, the pinnacle of male sexiness. But it's like, I don't know. It's very superficial and people should just go for who wants them. Like it's getting kind of like out of hand with the whole like, okay, if they aren't light or if they aren't dark, I don't know. People are people. I don't know. That's just my view. But anyway.
Hey Melinda, whatever happened to tall, dark, and handsome?
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm talking to someone who's tall, dark, and handsome, but it's just like, why does it have to be the preference now?
So have you
Because it
women?
was just like
Hey,
in the
I'm short,
80s,
white,
it
and
was like
plumpy.
being light and with good, quote unquote, good hair. That was the preference. It's like people are human. I don't know.
So when women say that, are they lying, or is it just a sort of a starting point, but other things may shape how they eventually be with someone?
I don't know. In my opinion, because like the people that I know, there's a lot of interracial dating, so it's not like an issue with them. But in my opinion, it's like when I see that highlighted, to me, it's like, and with the colorism thing, it's kind of like taking the humanity out of a person. Like, okay, they have to look a certain way. Why is that?
Okay, so our penultimate question to everyone before we go to the final question, which we'll be talking about solutions. What do you think is the biggest problem with colorism in the Black community that you've observed? What's the most damaging effect of colorism that you've observed? So, Cheryl, Melinda, Lakia.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, what's the biggest problem of colorism that you've observed in the Black community? What would you say is the most damaging effects of colorism that you observed?
I'm gonna say, well, I'm sorry, I don't know if anybody was gonna answer, but just the effect on self-esteem of people, you know, feeling like if you are not a certain color or if you don't have these features, then you are less than. That's the thing that hurts me the most. Not me personally anymore, because it was more like when I was a kid. And when you're a kid, you don't understand that, okay, these are thoughts in certain people's minds. But if you're a kid growing up, it's like there are children who harm themselves and commit suicide just because of this so-called preference. So I think that's pretty damaging.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree that the psychological piece is huge. Like Melinda is saying, there, and I see it a lot as a therapist, working with people of color, Black people, and a lot of Black people, a lot of Asians, a lot of Latino. And, I hear them talk about, colorism, how it's affected their lives, how difficult it has made their lives in terms of dating, because they have a preference for a lighter skin. And when they have that preference, they choose a partner just kind of based on these superficial qualities. And, it's very difficult for them when that partner isn't meeting up with their expectations, right? Like showing them love, being intimate with them, um, just all of those things, making them feel wanted, basic connection. Sometimes that I've noticed there is a little bit of an identity crisis, right? Where people are, choosing partners based on this criteria. Their partners have a completely different idea about them. And then, there's a lot of dissonance and breakup, and it leads back to mental health. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I have intrusive thoughts. I feel like I've been thinking about killing myself," or, watching darker kids do self-harm, right? Watching the darker kids in classrooms, not speak up because they feel like because of their dark skin, no one will listen to them, right? So they get like their voices and visibility is completely just like erased. And just on a psychological level, it's just like, how do you develop yourself as a full human being? It's very, very difficult. So that's just some of the ways that I feel like it's been harmful. I have other ideas. But I guess maybe we'll have a part 2 of this and I can continue. But Cheryl, were you going to say something?
I was just going to reiterate everything. It's definitely harmful, extremely harmful on a psychological level. The having not being able to love yourself for who you are. It's also harmful if if you're only looking at, regardless of who you are, looking at superficial qualities, because you think that there's currency based upon looks, and you stay in a relationship that is harmful to you, be it even if it's just psychological. Um, I'm thinking from a political point of view, it's possible, the potential for creating discord and disharmony, that is lack of harmony, is there when if you're going to if colorism comes up in terms of power and moving forward, and clearly it can, that the concept of colorism, that is having lighter skin, certain features in hair texture could actually affect any sort of solidarity amongst Black people. And that's all I have to say about that. I just don't want to participate in that thought, but it's real. It's there. I have a very beautiful. I love his skin complexion, my son, and it broke my heart when he came home and told me he wanted to be white. He was 8. I had to change that. I had to change that because I'm thinking, how you're so beautiful. How could you not want to look like that? How I wish I had your skin complexion. Oh my God, beautiful.
Mm. So now this brings me to the question that Stanley was pointing to in the private chat here, which is how are we raising our kids? I mean, if children are being raised with a certain sense of self-esteem, they're raised in a loving environment. Don't you think that all this would not be a problem? So how are parents contributing to this problem of colorism in the Black community?
The home is different from the outside. You can do everything you can. I think it's the community. So if you're not living in a predominantly Black community or Black neighborhood, it's problematic. It's problematic. I'm living in white Santa Cruz.
Mm. Lakia
Yeah.
and
It,
Melinda.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to piggyback on that. It's like the home is a little different. I was speaking to my stepmother who, she would buy us Black dolls and everything, but she would buy me the darker doll and buy my stepsister the lighter doll and call that one the pretty doll. So it kind of
What?
created an inferiority complex in me as a child in my home. I wasn't getting that, from school really, because I went to school with like different people. It wasn't like an issue, but in the house, it was like, okay, we're going to praise this child because she has these features and you are a little bit invisible. So, I mean, that's the issue that I think is in the Black community and is not really spoken of. It's like, okay, it's the outside that's doing that. No, not really. So,
Oh, that's heartbreaking. That's
Yeah, I have a similar situation, but I'm trying to still figure out whether this is colorism or are there other factors at play. So I have a sister I mentioned earlier that is part Chinese Cambodian and Black. Okay, my mom remarried when I was about 11 or 12 to my stepfather, who's Chinese Cambodian. And what I noticed was that my mom does like show more favoritism towards this child than she does all of her other children, which are, fully Black. And, uh, I keep thinking, well, maybe it's just because it's the last child, right? The last child always gets the best treatment, right? The parents are more lenient. Um, you know, they have more money, so they buy them better gifts, you know.
That is facts right there. Facts.
Right?
I'm the youngest in my family, and I can verify the truth of those things.
Yes, yes. And then she's also like Chinese, and so she has straighter hair and, you know, lighter skin and, you know, really beautiful features, as I would say, like most mixed people have, right? I don't like to use the term exotic, but that's the term that people use to describe their features. I just think that they're really beautiful and nice to look at, and, you know, it just feels pleasant when you look at them. And so,
Oh, wait. So, what you're saying, are they more beautiful, more nice to look at than black
it's
kids or white
no.
kids?
What I'm
Thank
saying
you for that,
is,
Charles.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I personally think everybody is beautiful, right? But what I've noticed about mixed people is they have features that are different from any other race, right? They have they will never come out the same. So it just feels like there is a rare beauty in
No,
mixing the races. From That's what I see, but I
Yeah.
also see a
I'm
rare
gonna have to
beauty.
disagree
What?
because the children are offspring of their parents. I have a friend. Myron is beautiful. He's chestnut brown. He's got hazel brown eyes. His son is a lighter version of him, but he looks spitting image of his father. So what I'm
Right.
trying to say is that if you have your physical beauty, however it is translated via genetics, DNA to your child. They just happen to have the other gene that's in the pool that changes maybe the hair texture, changes
Right.
maybe that lightens up the skin depending on how dark you are. It,
Mhm.
if you're the black parent in the relationship or the parent with more melanin in the relationship, I think we need to be. So
And
I
I'm
don't.
saying this in
That was an
context of my family. We're still talking about my sister and
okay.
in the context of my family. Okay.
I
So
just
let's
want to
look
say
at
for the
like,
record, Lakia, you are beautiful. You are
oh
beautiful.
no,
Your daughter
I
is gorgeous.
absolutely
And so
love,
that,
I
you just need to
absolutely
know
love
that.
myself. No, I absolutely love myself. I feel super empowered. I feel like I'm attractive. I have, you know, dated a a lot of guys who are attractive. I have had a great experience in this skin and I wouldn't change it for the world. Okay? So, let's get that very clear. And I'm not sure where I got that level of confidence about my black skin other than I guess maybe the women that I've been around. I'm just not sure, but I'm really 100% comfortable and would not change anything for the world. Okay. So, with that being said, my sister looks exotic in some ways. All of my mother's children are beautiful. All of them are attractive, but she looks different from the other group. And so my mom has like a different type of treatment towards her, even a preference. But, you know, my mom was also retired while raising this child, so she had more time to give her attention. There were more funds available because her father is a MD. There's a lot of other things that would have made that relationship more valuable to my mom. So I, you know, want to say that maybe partly it is colorism. Her skin's lighter. She really likes this child, but there's so many other factors. So it's really difficult for me to determine what Melinda was talking about just, you know, blatantly choosing another child over another one. That's really harmful and hurtful. You know, saying that this, you know, doll is lighter, therefore beautiful. My mom has never said those things. You know, a lot of people may see her practices and her behavior as, you know, kind of defining that as colorism, but I can't necessarily determine whether that's what it really is. So yeah, that's all I wanted to really add. So I guess to sum it up, like, how is it hurtful? Well, making someone feel less than, creating those inferior complexes, you know, You know, like I said, my mom has never told me I was dark and ugly, which is probably one of the reasons why I feel so beautiful. I may not be as beautiful as I think I am, but I feel beautiful, you know? I think that's that's one of the qualities of a woman that makes her beautiful is she feels beautiful, right? We're talking about qualities in women and stuff like that. But anyway, that's all I have to share. Cheryl, you want to finish up with what you were saying?
All I want, okay, I'm just gonna hop on the last. Not only do you feel beautiful, you are physically beautiful. I am a person who sees. I like pretty. I like beauty. So I see beauty in a lot of things: flowers, plants, animals, people, and I recognize your beauty, and it's not just skin deep. So, having said that, I don't have anything else to say other than that it's heartbreaking when, but it's also internalized hatred when we teach our children um, that something that they're less than because of something they have nothing, they can't control. They can't control how much melanin is going to be in every layer of that epidermal of the epidermis. They can't control. They can't control what their features are going to look like based upon the genes. They can't control that. And and some of us are lucky and we bring in very beautiful children into the world. Others, our children are plain, but they're still our children and we still should love them. And I don't know. And there's a lot to be said about that, about parenting. And that's not what we're going here. I see that someone
Mhm.
said, this reminds me of Tony
Can
Morrison, Blue's Eye.
can I ask a quick question though,
Yeah, go
Charles?
ahead, Stanley. Yeah.
Um, and I may have missed it because my internet has been spotty, but how are we raising our sons to be better sons, better men? And I think, that was kind of how do we raise our sons to be better? And girls to women too.
You teach them to be human. You teach them to be human.
Yeah, you
As a,
teach them to love themselves,
right,
irrespective of what anybody thinks or says about them,
right.
and to
And
have a healthy ego observer, right?
right, and you normalize some of the things that are. It's okay to talk about your feelings as a young man. You normalize that. As a single mother, I was at my son is articulate about his feelings. He has that male energy, which I love, but he also is very articulate. He's very. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good. And there were some know, rough patches, but I'm feeling pretty good about where he's going right now. And you do what you do. You give them what you can. You know it has to be the best, but you do teach them to be human. You let them know that common, the least common denominator is that we're all human. But you also try and instill pride of who you are. Let them know the reality of what it's like to live in this world that's racist. Someone says no peace down. I don't know what that's about. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's no problem.
okay.
Yeah.
So so I don't know. I think um, genderizing humans has created a problem. Although men and women are different, and I'm generalizing now, but I don't know whether that's taught or if that's real.
All right. So, Stanley, I have this question for you. Your son is a mixed race kid. Do you think that your son has any experience that will be different from a kid who has both parents as black? Has your son had experience that different from black kids that have both parents as black?
Do you really want to ask me that question?
Yeah,
Every
I do.
Steve is gonna love this one. Um, every kid's experience is different. Now this is going to be really metaphysical, I guess. But which kid? It doesn't. every kid's experience is going to be different. So, um, yeah, um, he's a mixed kid, but he's also smart and funny. And I think it's all in how you raise your kids. And yes, I'm going on because I love my son, but
You're allowed to.
you, it's. I have a huge joke to make, which will piss everybody off, but I'm not going to make it. You know me, Steve. No, I think it is too narrow a question. He's a mixed kid. Um, Charles and you and Steve know, it's mostly been me raising him. So I can't really answer the question. He's doing fine.
Can I pipe in here, Charles?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
So the reason why I brought up Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye was because the main character in that, Piccola Breedlove, wishes to have blue eyes so that she was pretty like the other white girls. And how we tie that into this conversation is like we need to teach our children, in my opinion, that we shouldn't be looking outside of ourselves for the beauty standards that other people impose on us. Like we are beautiful and amazing human beings in our own skin. Like we are beautiful as the people that we are. And the one thing that I've tried to teach my own son and my own children, both my sons and my daughter, is that my opinion of you or anybody else's opinion of you is none of your damn business. You should be looking internally for your own beauty and not looking for it externally. And this is the main problem that I have with our culture, is that we're looking outside at beauty standards that are unhealthy in the first place just by the practice of doing so. That was my main point of bringing up Toni Morrison is the character of Piccola is looking outside of herself to view what she believes is a beauty standard that is not really not necessary. Piccola is beautiful by herself.
All right. So final question. Let's look at solutions. What 3 things do you guys think can be done to address the issue of colorism in the Black communities? So anyone can start.
If I could say something about The Bluest Eye, I was given that book to read in middle school by my aunt because she thought I had that inferiority complex about myself, but it was actually her. And so maybe that is a way to start within the Black community. It's like, okay, address your own self-hatred. Sorry, that might seem harsh, but it's like if you are passing that down to your kids, that's where it becomes toxic. It's like if you're bleaching your skin, which my aunt made me do, if you are, no offense against people who wear wigs. If you are wearing wigs, if you have this own inferiority complex about yourself and against other people in the Black community, it's going to trickle down. So maybe taking a look at yourself and your own issues could help. That's all.
Thank you, Melinda. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to tag on to what I was saying earlier. Is also, if you look at what racialized Black women did to their hair, to their scalps in the early 1900s and before that, trying to live up to the white beauty standard, you quickly come to realize that the white beauty standard isn't the problem. The problem is that we're coveting something that shouldn't be coveted in the first place. There is no, there's no need for a white beauty standard. It's like that was the problem that I think really needed to be addressed in that time. Was it's like, no, we are beautiful as we are. My curly hair is beautiful as it is, right? I think that's always the part that when I hear about those stories or I read about those stories, my heart is always crushed because inside there is some level of lack of confidence in one's own beauty, either via social or peer pressure or by our own doing. I want people to look inside themselves and find the beauty that they have naturally as they sit in their own skin. I mean, I'm fascinated by people's souls, their spirits, and I hate it when I come across someone who doesn't like their own soul. It crushes me.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So, Lakia and Cheryl, what are your thoughts? What 3 things can we do to address the issue of colorism in the Black community?
Well, I was struck by what Melinda said in terms of examining self-hatred. And self-hatred is a product of anti-Black racism. And so colorism for sure is. So I'm not really sure, and I see Stanley wrote everywhere is not California, but anti-Black racism exists internationally. So with that, I think that's part of it. But how do you esteem people? How do you teach people to esteem themselves? I know people are doing it in small little circles, and I guess that's one way.
Move to Georgia.
Where in Georgia?
Savannah,
but not Atlanta.
Well, the joke used to be the joke used to be when I was a kid. There's Atlanta in the rest of Georgia, so I lived in the rest of Georgia.
Okay. I'm just what was it? It's a friend of mine. We went to school together from middle school through college, and she said, I can't remember who got elected. She said, "Girl, when I stayed in blue," she said, "them white folks." She said, "Oh, them white folks done lost their damn mind."
Well, look, Lakia's from Savannah. She'll give you the good stuff and the bad stuff too.
Don't move to Savannah. I like it here in Santa Cruz much better. It's too hot there in the summer.
Oh, oh my goodness, that's going to be a conversation we should have.
Listen. I will live in Savannah in any other season except for the summer. I can't live there in the summer. It's too hot. But
it's not the heat, it's the humidity.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, the humidity in the East Coast is crushing.
Yes, it is.
Like just spending what little time I did in South Carolina was brutal. And I'm from Utah. I'm from a desert.
It's all the way up to New York. From New York down to
No, it's not.
Yes, New York is really hot and muggy and so much humid in the summer.
It's because of all those buildings that trap the heat and humidity.
Okay, well, it's there.
You all are so funny.
Hey, you guys are talking about heat. You guys should come to Africa.
I was going to say, Charles is going to pipe in here any second now because he lives on the coast too. So,
oh yeah. So yeah, like how do we solve this problem? I think we need more than 3 answers. But the ones that I'm coming up with right now is to there needs to be like more love in the community, right? There needs to be more love between parents. First, we need 2-parent households. And then those 2 parents have to love themselves a lot, right? They have to really understand themselves, have an established identity, have a lot of self-love through practice, right? You can practice self-love every single day. You can find something about yourself that you love, right? And that could be your daily mantra. That's one way of doing it, right? Parents should talk to their children about how beautiful they are inside and out. I think that's really, really important. I don't think that I told my daughter she was beautiful enough. And that's because everyone out in the world told my daughter that she's beautiful and she's extraordinarily beautiful is what I've been told by people. And so that still didn't matter that much because my daughter has had to overcome low self-esteem, right? And so, telling your kids that they're beautiful, no matter what color they are, and they have to believe that, and they have to love everything about themselves and keep re-falling in love with yourselves for the rest of your life, right? So those are the two things that I've come up with. There also needs to be a lot of, studying of history, right? History of, because I believe all Black people in the diaspora are actually all people on the planet are descendants of Africa, because Africa is the cradle of society. So fall in love with that history, learn about it. There's great things that can be discovered, from just looking into your history. Question beauty standards, right? Where do they come from? How did I come to know like what beauty is, right? Beauty standards, what just question things. And have conversations about it, right? I think a lot of the darker skinned women that are silenced, and feel invisible, I think they need to talk about that more, talk about their experience more, share it with other dark skinned women, but also share it with other people in the Black community. Because sometimes I feel like these practices are just so like internalized and we've metabolized them that we don't even think about how we could be hurting other people by choosing someone over someone else. So those are just a few ideas that I have about like, how we can start in the home and the community and, with ourselves.
Oh. Good. So this has been a fruitful 2-hour conversation. I want to thank you guys for coming and for sharing your opinions and your voices on this topic of colorism. Like you all have said, people should love themselves for who they are, and they shouldn't be looking for validation outside of themselves, especially in terms of their physical attractiveness. But as we said, also parents should be a key factor in helping kids model and build their self-esteem, because parents are like the role models, the first role models that kids grow up looking up to. And if the parents just shatter the self-esteem of a child, it becomes very difficult for them to build it up and not to be susceptible to what other people think of them. So the home front is very, very, very important. I want to appreciate you guys for coming. And I also want to say to you, Steve, that I don't like last bonds. We firstborns were not friends with last bonds, because we firstborns, we take all the shit, we take all the work and everything, and you guys just come along at the end of the day to enjoy everything. So have a beef with last bonds. Anyway, that's the conversation today.
With who?
Last bonds, like you.
What do you mean?
You made a reference earlier about last bonds, and I'm just saying that firstborns like us, we don't like last bonds, because you guys get to enjoy everything.
Last born and firstborn. Gotcha.
Yeah. So thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you in another conversation. That will be all for today. So
Enjoy the weekends. Take care.
You too. Bye.